This is a 2024 CRV Sport L that I've owned for basically as soon as it came out. I got this one on order in July 2023 and picked it up at the very end of July. And I'm not a car reviewer, so I'll tell you what I love about this car and anything that I don't after having owned it for almost a year now. And before I get into any bad, I'm gonna tell you this is the best car I've ever owned by far. I've had probably about 9 different cars over the years, and this thing rocks. It gets like 34 miles per gallon in the hills of Pittsburgh and stop and go, and it has a boatload of power, especially considering the kind of gas mileage that it gets. There's some pretty surprising things that a lot of the car reviewers aren't going to really tell you about this. First of all, most any car you've ever owned will have a cast iron exhaust manifold or a steel exhaust manifold where it can rust, it can leak, it can have all sorts of problems. Well, this has an integral manifold. It's part of the aluminum cylinder head, and then the exhaust pipe just mounts right onto that. So it's kind of one less thing to worry about in my book. I think now you just have this one little connection versus these 4 giant holes coming out of the engine. The car's actually running right now, and you probably can't hear it. It's just doing things. It's kicking the air conditioning compressor on and off, but the actual gas engine isn't running. It doesn't need to be running because it's warm enough out. It doesn't need to be heating the coolant. The air conditioning compressor is run by the high voltage battery in the back. So it's not belt driven. There's no belt driven accessories on this car. So there's no serpentine belt. That's another thing you never are gonna have to change on this car because it just doesn't exist. You'll see this high voltage wire goes down to the AC compressor, and this one goes to the big motors that drive the wheels, and well, a big motor that drives the wheels, and then also there's a generator that generates power to charge up the high voltage battery. And if the high voltage battery scares you in the sense that it's going to cost a fortune to replace someday, I mean, this is a 4th generation of hybrid for Honda. I think it's probably going to last pretty long. It's got, I believe, an 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty on the battery. What's also interesting is when you think of these EV batteries, you think of like a Tesla Model Y, a little SUV like this, that has a 75 kilowatt hour battery. This only has about a 1 kilowatt hour battery. So it's like a little suitcase versus like the whole underside of the car being your battery. So, I mean, I think it's gonna be comparable to if your transmission were to go. I think that's probably about what it would cost to replace a battery in a car like this. So it's almost apples to apples cost risk to like a non-hybrid car, because this doesn't really have a traditional transmission. It's more of almost like a direct drive. They call it a CVT, but I don't think that's exactly what you think of when you think of a CVT. It's more that it has this continuously variable, like it's not really shifting gears, it's just that the motor continuously provides the torque that it needs at the RPM that it needs. Sometimes it'll lock in the actual gas engine to the wheels, but not like your sort of belt driven type CVTs where you kind of expect them to crap out on you at like 100,000 miles. Another thing about this kind of exhaust manifold is if you're scared of your catalytic converter being stolen, well, in this car, it's literally under the hood and kind of over the kind of front cross member. It's just not accessible. It's not like you can just roll under the car with a Sawzall and boom, boom, pop it off. You'd have to basically destroy the whole car to get to the catalytic converter while it's all locked and you can't get access to open the hood. I think that's a big enough deterrent. I don't think people are going to be doing that, but hey, you never know. The engine in this hybrid is a 2.0 liter, which is bigger than the engine that's used in the non-hybrid. So the non-hybrid is, I believe, a 1.5 liter turbo. This is a 2.0 liter non-turbo. Makes a little bit less power, and part of the reason is because it's a Atkinson cycle, which is super cool. basically it's trying to utilize every molecule of fuel by having this extra stroke length when it's pushing that piston down. So normally it's just waste, it's just not worth the effort to keep pushing it down and push it up, so they end up blowing some unspent combustion out of the exhausts, where in this case they are fully utilizing that stroke. But then what you see is it has like a 13.9 to 1 compression ratio, so you think it must need to use like 110 octane gas. Well, that's the compression ratio in the sense of the ratio piston down to ratio of volume piston up. Well, what an Atkinson cycle does is it leaves the intake valve open for a little bit while the piston's going up. So it really doesn't have that high PSI compression. So you can still run your normal like 87 octane in this car, nothing exotic there. The trade-off with an Atkinson is it doesn't have as broad of a power band as a normal engine, but it doesn't matter because it's a hybrid. Half the time we're just charging a battery. We have this massive torque from the electric motors, so we don't necessarily need that, you know, broad sweeping power band. And I'll tell you, it feels like it has a ton of power. It feels like it has a lot more than it says, to be honest. It has about 250 foot-pounds of torque, and I think it's feels like more than that. So that just about covers it for under the hood. Now I'll show you a couple more things. The back doors open like a full 90 degrees. You can just chuck things in and out of here. If you're putting like a car seat in, super easy. There's a crazy amount of space back here. If you've had a car seat in a car backwards, you'll find that some of these small SUVs like a CX-5, it's like forcing you to push the front seat way forward. That's not the case with this car. It has a ton of space. So now we'll take a look inside the car. I'm 6'3", and for a small SUV, this fits me pretty well. The biggest complaint with all these small SUVs is going to be the headroom. I can put the seat probably almost 2 inches lower, but then I feel like I'm just like in an uncomfortable seated position. As far as legroom, I've got a ton of it. I could probably put the seat back 3 more inches from where I have it set right now. Here's our little climate control settings. They've got a nice click, but one complaint that I have about this is it doesn't have a heat pump like what an electric car would have. It just uses a normal heater core, so it has to heat up the antifreeze in order to provide heat. And what you'll find on small trips in the winter, if you're only driving maybe 3 or 4 miles, even though you have a fully charged battery, so this tells you how much battery charge you have, it'll still kick the gas engine on and it'll be driving in gas mode basically, because it's trying to heat up that antifreeze to provide you heat. So I find that I lose probably 5 miles per gallon in the winter. I'll get around Pittsburgh about 35 in the summer, and I'll get closer to 30 in the winter. And I do a lot of short trips, so that's really not helping my cause there. Something way cool about this stereo system is that, and that you don't really hear people say this, but you can actually rewind it or go backwards, and it seems to kind of go back song by song as if you're skipping backwards. And you can go back all the way back until when you started the car, and it's not just on the channel that you started on. It'll do it on any channel that you have saved. And what I find is even it'll sometimes do it on channels that you don't have saved. So let's see if I go to channel list here and just click on like this channel, see what happens. Yeah, so on this channel, it doesn't let me go back, but I can't quite figure it out what channels it does. I do know the channels that you do have saved, it'll let you go backwards in time, which is way cool. If you change channels, you're like, I don't like that song, you can skip up to maybe, honestly, a couple hours back in time if you've been driving for that long. So you got all kinds of songs to choose from. The Android Auto, if you haven't messed with that, is incredible. I love it. It's great. The only thing I have found is that about twice since I've owned this car, I had to go into this secret menu where I think I had to hold like the back button, the power button, and the home button, and fully restart the stereo because it would lose my phone. Like, it would say it was there, but it would say it was unable to connect. And by restarting it, like a hard reboot, it solved the problem. So that was kind of annoying, I would say. Something else, you see it has this inductive charging pad where you just set your phone on it. Honestly, it's kind of useless. I was using it for a while. I thought it was kind of cool, but then I'll find my phone will just get really hot and it's just not charging very fast at all. So I think that's probably not one of those features that is really worth it if you're gonna pay extra for a different trim level just for that. These drive modes, you can hit them here and you see what happens up here. So it's in sport, normal, econ, snow and econ. I don't find that econ's really giving you any better miles per gallon. Normal is what I spend most of my time in, and sport makes like a big difference in throttle response. It's really like a night and day different car when you're in sport mode. On the back of the steering wheel, you see these paddles. So they're basically what it allows you to do is regenerative brake kind of on command, which if you press the brake pedal, the same thing's going to happen. But it just feels nice to just kind of, instead of touching the brake pedal, you can just touch this down arrow. If you put it in B mode, you can see these three little dots up here. So if I press the down paddle, it goes from 3 to 4. If I press the up paddle, 4 to 3 to 2. And what that does is when I let off on the gas in B mode, it basically says how much it's gonna coast, whether it's gonna coast well or it's gonna like feel like it's kind of slamming on the brakes as you let off on the gas, where you can almost do that like one pedal driving like these Tesla people like to do. Also in sport mode, if you adjust the paddles, it'll stay like that. So if you drive in sport mode, it actually can be basically the same as B mode, where you can set it to level 4 regenerative braking and it stays that way even after you hit the gas again. If you paddle down in normal mode, it'll reset itself back to like a normal level of coasting after you hit the gas again. It'll just only do that aggressive braking when you're paddling down. The windshield washers spray from a nozzle right on top of the windshield wipers. I don't really have an opinion about that, but some people love or hate that. So that pretty much covers it. I have no complaints whatsoever about this car. I've heard some people complain about things. Maybe if you're coming from like an Acura, you might think that this isn't as ultra premium, but frankly, I think the Sport L is as premium as I need in a car. I really couldn't want anything different. It doesn't have the garage door openers on the mirror. That's one thing people complain about. You can put a different mirror in it though if you want. I believe Honda offers the mirror with the garage door opener buttons for like $200. I don't really care about that, to be honest. If there's any cool features you know about that are worth me knowing about as a CR-V hybrid owner, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.